That big gun. We had a meeting about it. That's why I like it. Welcome to Policy and Priorities. I see we have quorum, and I call this meeting to order. First order of business, moved by Councillor Junkin, that the agenda for March 21st, 2016 regular meeting of Policy and Priorities Committee be adopted. Any additions or questions about the agenda? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Disclosure of any pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof.
No, Mr. Chair.
Note that there are none have been declared.
None.
Next order of business. Moved by Councillor Junkin that the Committee of the Whole receive, that should be put Policy and Priority next, that the Policy and Priority Committee receive the issue sheet regarding the Timsdale Estate subdivision, all phases, assumption of subdivision services, and that Policy and Priorities recommend to Council that the town assume the municipal services in the Timsdale Estates subdivision and open the street within the subdivision as a public highway by bylaw in accordance with the subdivision agreement executed between the town and U. Lucetta Construction Limited. Questions or comments? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I believe this is for the Director of Public Works. There were some concerns expressed by residents probably about 4 to 6 months ago about drainage in the subdivision, and some of them encouraged us that these issues should be dealt with before we assume the subdivision. Can the Director give us a little bit of an update on some of those issues, please?
Madam Director?
Ken, through you, Mr. Chair. They started actually the day I started, which was more than a year ago.
Okay.
So that's why the delay. We wanted to make sure we worked through those. Some of them were related to the drainage of the subdivision, so it did justify the delay. Some of them were more specific to the lots and lots that had already been built out, sold, and changed hands. So we kind of worked through those. In our opinion, for public works scope, they've been resolved, and we don't see any reason to hold this out anymore for drainage.
That's good to know. Thank you. Certainly those residents have not contacted me lately, but so I'm pleased to hear that it's been resolved. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
Mr. Mayor. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Next order of business, moved by Councillor Papp, that the Policy and Priority Committee receive this issue summary sheet for information as it pertains to application file number SP 0111, municipally known as 1535 Haste Street. That committee direct planning staff to prepare the bylaw and site plan agreement authorizing the mayor and clerk to enter in a site plan agreement between the town of Pelham and Lucetta Construction Limited, and that council approve the bylaw and enter into a site plan agreement with Lucetta Construction Limited. Questions or comments? Mr. Mayor?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Very pleased to see the piece, and I think it was Councillor Junkin that raised it. Maybe I'm jumping ahead of him. I apologize if I am. But about the trail access. The potential trail access off Hay Street, I know that was a concern during some of the public meetings and from the one of the committees we had, the Active Transportation Committee. There is a bit of a map here, which is heartening to see. Can we hear a little bit more about that, perhaps? Mr. Chair?
Madam Director?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, the Director of Recreation, Culture and Wellness and myself and Planner Julie Hanna did meet with the Nature Conservancy, and we talked with them about access to this, to their lands from Hay Street, and where we could safely provide access. They certainly have walked the area and have confirmed that there's a spot, kind of just as you get to the bottom of the hill, where they can provide safe access into their site, which wouldn't require trespassing onto private property or anything like that. And they want to develop that trail this over this spring and summer.
Well, that's great.
be there.
That's excellent. Thank you very much. Very, very pleased to see that. That was a concern from members of the community. And just finally to the development itself, it's very, very nice looking development and certainly will add to the community. So thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Others? Councillor Junkin?
I'll just repeat what the mayor said again. Kudos to all staff that worked in getting that trail through. That's really going to be appreciated by a lot of people. Thanks a lot again.
Okay, other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? It carries. Moved by Councillor Junkin that the Policies and Priorities Committee recommend that council receive the following interdepartmental concept papers for information. Emergency Preparedness Committee, Green Team, Communications and Engagement, Joint Health and Safety Committee, Strong Neighborhoods, Process Improvement, Infrastructure Wealth Creation, and Customer Service Standards. Questions or comments? A lot of information there. Oh, I thought I was going to get away with it.
I just wondered, we did have a conversation with the CAO. I wondered if he could just provide us a bit of a background on sort of what follows this. What follows receipt of this, why it's coming to council, et cetera.
Mr. CEO?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. By way of background, since the performance management system has been put into place each year, the directors, along in partnership with the staff, have strived to make it better. As you'll notice this year, one of the changes is that there are far fewer interdepartmental teams. We've actually cut that in about half. In response to feedback from staff, where previous years we've had staff anywhere between 2 and 3 interdepartmental teams per year. The feedback was it's a lot of work, and to get quality product, they were feeling stretched, and we certainly wanted to continue to engage staff and make it something they wanted to do, as opposed to something that was more punitive and they had to do. The second thing was that we had some feedback from the teams with regards to the role of the coach. So you'll see the coaches beside each project. Last year, some of the content or some of the objectives that were desired didn't happen because there was miscommunication between the coach and the team with regards to what the team was supposed to be actually doing. So this year, what we did to make sure that everyone was on the same page is that each of the coaches at the beginning of, or the inaugural meeting, if you will, of these interdepartmental teams, did a pre-consult using our process. And from that pre-consult, very clearly outlined what the expectations were of the team. The coach then was required to take the pre-consult and turn it into what we call a concept paper, which council is familiar with, is a tool that we've been using to write reports, etc. So each of the teams that you see, those concept papers have been developed by the teams themselves in conjunction with the coach, but they lay out the mandate, they lay out things like milestones, the rationale for why they're doing things, etc. Then the coaches vetted them through the group, the senior management team, and there was unanimous support for everything that you see before you. So it's not one coach working in isolation. It's actually everything from the bottom up is from a team approach, and we're very pleased. And I think that some of the objectives and the successes we can achieve in some of these will be quite outstanding as we move through the year.
Thank you. The reports that we have got from the interdepartmental committees in the past have been excellent, and the work that they have done has been fantastic, and it certainly has helped us move forward. And the nice part is that it all supports and builds on our strategic plan, which is our backbone. So it is a very positive thing, and I'm very encouraged to see the new concept papers coming through and all of the work that's going to be done. Full confidence that we're going to have some excellent products as we did in the past. So congratulations, and keep up the good work, staff. Other questions or comments?
Thumbs up. Good job, Mr. Chair.
Councilor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to, I guess, make an observation with regard to the concept paper on communication and engagement. We heard again today earlier in council how a fairly important constituency of ours, i.e. the seniors, have issues with modern means of communication very often. And certainly we've heard at other times the barriers that exist to electronic communication in much of the town, physically much of the town, not necessarily in terms of the population, but much of the town still doesn't have access to high speed and that sort of thing. As I read through the concept paper, I see that there is an attempt that is going to be made by that team to look at how people want to be heard, want to be communicated with, how to receive that. And I would certainly want to encourage that the team to consider those particular challenges perhaps at a higher level of priority as they go through their work and sort of deal with that kind of specifically. I know that our treasurer is the coach of that, and I'm sure she's hearing this. But I think that's something that we've heard often, and we've heard it again today, that there's a good proportion of the town that doesn't feel as though the means that we choose to communicate with them effectively reach them. So maybe that can be considered.
Madam Treasurer, you have a comment?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to reiterate that the team that we have actually has a resident that lives in Fenwick that does not have access to internet. So she's a good resource for letting us know that we need to be able to communicate in many different forms. So we are, after this concept paper was done, the next phase was to do the idea finding and coming up with ideas to reach out to those residents. And how do you find out what ways they want to be communicated with if you're not reaching out in the way that they can be communicated with? So those are the things we're working on.
Thank you. And this comes up just about every time we talk about communications, and it's certainly something that has to be high on our radar screen because we need to communicate with everyone. Okay, any other questions or comments? Look forward, like I said before, to some excellent work coming out of there. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Next order of business, moved by Councillor King, that the committee recommend the council receive the report on Syrian refugee funding request for information. Questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Moved by Councillor Ribbiak that the Policies and Priorities Committee issue summary report, student driving revision to policy, and that committee recommend council adopt a revised municipally owned vehicles policy. Questions or comments? Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'm thoroughly and completely supportive of the notion that qualified and certified students should be allowed to drive our vehicles, particularly as it will increase the effectiveness and efficiency of town staff being able to use additional hours and that sort of thing. My comment is with regard to the form of the policy itself. It's a policy that really is extremely huge. And in fact, in reading through it, I see that there are probably 3 separate policies combined into this one. One, I think, is about student driving, of course, which is what we're talking about. But this thing also covers the policy of driving by employees generally. And I guess there's a third element that I saw in this, which has to do with the allocation of vehicles to specific personnel for their use on a 24-hour basis for all the very good reasons that there are. I think that this is a policy that might do well if we could maybe separate it into those 3, and that the policy statements be just exactly that brief. That the town, for example, council supports a policy wherein students who are qualified and capable should be able to drive. And the many, many important elements that exist throughout the policy as it's currently written might do better in an appendix that can be updated, modified, and just kept current without necessarily having to come back to council for any of those changes. it just seems to me like if we're looking for a way of coming up with a policy statement, this is far more a procedure, far more a set of qualifications than it is merely a policy, and I wonder whether it might be written in a way to make that a lot easier.
Okay, the whole concept here is dealing with one set of driver, that being the student, but I'll let the CAO elaborate on this because we did have a little discussion on that earlier, so I'm sure this will clarify.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an amendment to the existing policy, so this policy is already in effect. What we want to do is amend it with the provision to allow the students as outlined in the issue sheet. So for us to go back, we would, under what you're suggesting, we would be going back and literally rewriting the entire driving policy. So I would request that council consider including this amendment, and if there's changes to the overall policy format, we'd be happy to look at that at a later date.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Sorry. Through you, Mr. Chair, that's fine. I appreciate that. My attempt at this is just to make it easier, simpler, make it clear what the policy actually is. The great work behind it, of course, needs to be there somewhere as well. At the moment, it's here in the policy statement, and if it's going to be looked at later, that's fine.
We'll leave that to you and staff, Mr. Councilor,
Yes.
Mr. CEO. Mr. Mayor, you had a comment?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So, just for clarity, this other policy that's here is, just for background, even though it's in the current system, it's from 2006, I guess. So that it's just there for information. You're going to now, if approved at committee, take the policy and update it. Is that correct?
We will amend the policy based on the wording
Okay.
we've recommended.
That wasn't clear. So
Yeah.
that's great. Thank you. I'm supportive of the change.
So it's going to be the same thing, only different. Any other questions or comments? Councilor Junkin.
A silly comment probably, but obviously our insurance providers must be on side with the students driving as long as they're qualified and what have you.
I believe consultation has been done with that, but I'll let the
That is
CAO.
correct, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Yep. So we're clear on all angles there. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. My last official duty as Chair of Policies and Priorities is moved by Councillor King that this regular meeting of Policies and Priorities Committee be adjourned until the next committee meeting scheduled for Monday, April 4th, 2016, unless sooner called by the mayor.
Mr. Chair, just to that,
Mr.
I
Mayor.
do want to thank you very much for serving as chair of PNP and also as deputy mayor. Certainly very, very diligent in your services as deputy mayor, so thank you very much. We, as council will recall, we rotate the deputy mayor's role. And it's alphabetical. So first it was Councillor Kersey for the first 8 months, then yourself, Councillor Durley, and now it will move to Councillor Junkin for 8 months starting April 1st. So I want to be, on behalf of council, thank you very much, Councillor Durley, for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Any questions or comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. This meeting is adjourned. I'll give it a little tap, not a big one like the mayor.
Good job.